All right. Are you ready to do this?
Let's do it.
All right. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest, Jackson Goading. Jackson, welcome, man.
Thank you very much for having me, Guy.
All right. So Jackson is a counselor and a psychotherapist at Find Reason Therapy, a private practice in Australia, and specifically Crow's Nest, which is a suburb of Australia. Jackson prides himself in helping individuals to find reason to live, to grow, and to understand. His foundations and core focus in relationships and codependency, working in particular with understanding what has happened in the past that leaves emotional pain in one's present. Jackson also has a podcast, and the name of your podcast is also
Reason with Me.
Reason with Me. Okay. So I want to talk about that too. All right, man. So let's jump in here. But before we do, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you're calling from currently.
So I'm originally from Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. And yeah, now I'm sort of in a suburb near Crow's Nest, but in Cremorne in Sydney.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let's just dive in here. How the heck did you get into this field? You're a pretty young guy, right?
Yeah. I'm a young guy. I'm 27 years old, so I guess I've been counselling for probably 5 or 6 years. And yeah, it's a good question. It's a long one, a long answer, I guess. But I just always wanted to sort of help people, and I gave that answer all the time. Is when anyone asks me, like, what do you want to do in your life? I just want to help people. And that was sort of my answer for ages. And it wasn't until I started doing work on myself that I realized that isn't just the answer. The finding the real answer was we're just going to get straight into it, Guy. I'm just going to launch in. Is when I started seeing a therapist, and they started telling me, they started saying that their mom was in addiction, and they worked effortlessly as a kid to try and help her and fix her and do whatever they could to help her. And I was sort of thinking, like, oh, is that my experience? And after like quite a lot of work early on in my career, I started to realize, like, yeah, so I had a divorced kid. So my parents split up when I was 7. And I guess from then on, I started creating that I'm not good enough and I don't matter sort of core message and core belief about myself, and really depended on people, me needing to do a certain amount for myself and a certain amount for others to be seen and to be validated. And I got my needs met based off meeting other people's needs. And I bounced around from relationship to relationship trying to figure that out. And it wasn't until, I was about 22, 23. I'm like, that's why I'm counseling. And I strongly believe that every counselor or everyone in this profession has a reason that brings them into this space to do this sort of work. And that's a very shortened version of why I'm here. And I guess bouncing into trauma is, I started off in an addiction treatment center in Sydney called South Pacific Private, which is really based off the Meadows, which is out in the States. And I was just blown away. And this place was just this vortex and this community that was just constantly dealing with people's stuff, and all my stuff's coming out in this place as well. And I realized, like, these guys are talking about all their childhood experiences, and now they're all, in addiction or in their mental health, and going, it's just super unresolved. So I realized that, the work's there, and that's what I want to be doing. So we don't have this sort of trauma-based clinics here like we should. There's probably a couple, but not as many as there are in America and other parts of the world. So I just follow the trauma and just, work wherever it is. So I'm aware that whether it's, big kids with lots of, pasts, or really young kids that are just sort of just experiencing and still in that chaos. So yeah, that's me.
Getting right into it. I appreciate you sharing that, man. I think one of the things that struck me and strike me about you, Jackson, is, I said you're young, but to start doing, work on yourself at such a young age, I think that kind of shows a lot of awareness on your part. You talked about being used the word divorced kid at 7. Would you mean you were put up for adoption at 7?
No. So my
Oh,
parents were
okay.
divorced. My
Okay, your
parents
parents.
got
Okay,
divorced at 7. Sorry, no.
okay.
So I just, yeah, I guess I experienced that, and for different reasons. When I was 7, I didn't understand, and then my dad coming in and out, I was
Right.
like, when you're in, I want to make sure that I'm this best guy, or I'd rebel against that and be seen by being really, really naughty. So my experiences was just like, please, like, love me, love me, love me, wherever I
Mm,
could get it. And I didn't understand that at the time, but I really rely on my friends now, and always have done, even though me and my family, we're very strong. Like, I sort of switched and became so much more like caring and dependent on my friends, and
mhm.
basing all my relationships off what I could bring to them. And yeah, that's come up in different ways, in a really unhealthy way, but also in a really beautiful way. And how I guess why I'm doing this work as well is there's a lot of good that's come out of that, and a lot of pain that's come out of that too.
What was the impetus for you to start seeking therapy for yourself?
That's funny. It's not funny, but I guess I didn't start realizing that, we all have trauma. We all have experienced some sort of less than nurturing experience. And until I met, I was in a relationship, probably when I was like 21, 22, and she had her own struggles as well. And I guess I was doing everything I could to just try and save her. And it wasn't until I went to therapy, sat down in the chair and said, hello, I would like to find skills and tools to help someone else. And he looked at me like, is this a joke? And I was like, no, I'm serious. Like, I want to pay you to help me help someone else. And I kind of was like, he's like, that's backwards. And we had this really, I didn't like him at all, because he kept challenging me on this stuff. And I ended up leaving, being like, this guy has no idea what he's doing. And it wasn't until after that I realized I needed to save myself. All my
Wow.
stuff was coming up in this relationship that I didn't realize. And I thought the only way to do this was to try and help them, when really I was the one that needed to help myself. So that's my first experience in
Mm.
counseling is, you are codependent. You will do anything to get your needs met by meeting the needs of others.
Wow, that's really interesting. So for those listeners who, maybe have heard of codependency, but maybe aren't exactly sure what it is, why don't you give us your definition?
Okay. So my favorite definition, and there's a lot floating around, and it has a long origin history with addiction, and depending on, I guess, alcoholism and other addictions, and that person trying to do everything for that person. It's sort of formed and developed over time. The best way that I describe it is, if you were a cold guy, and I wanted to do something about that, the normal response, so not my response, the normal response is, I'll give you my jacket to keep you warm. Whereas a codependence response is, I will light myself on fire to keep
Mm,
you warm.
wow, that's
And
amazing.
and you're warm then, and you're real warm. You're probably too warm. You're getting your needs met way more than you thought you were going to meet them, whilst I burn and happily burn until I'm burnt out.
That's a pretty incredible definition. I mean, it's you get the message right away. So, did at some point you realize, wow, I am codependent, and I want to not only help people, but help people with this particular issue?
Yeah,
Okay,
pretty
so
much.
talk a little bit about that evolution, about how you realized that, and then how you started, your path to becoming a therapist and so forth.
So it's sort of formed over time, in that work, I guess. I in the hospital where they run this model of codependency, this person called Pia Melody talks a lot about facing codependency and what that looks like and what that means. And essentially, the model that they run in this treatment center is all about everything that you come in with is a secondary symptom. And their primary symptoms or your core issues are all that stuff that's based within, all that's, all those basic needs that need to be met, like our reality, our self-esteem, our boundaries, all those basic things that I guess have been distorted when we were younger. And the more I started working and understanding that and seeing how it really shaped, people would walk in with, I've got addiction or I've got depression, and walk out with, well, I've also got codependency and intimacy issues. So I guess that sort of formulated exactly how I wanted to work. And then, I moved on to work with really, really probably the most intense kids in the state, the people that were in out of home care, so wards of the state, or kids that are in care that really were at the top end of that trauma, and just how much that reality of theirs was distorted, and their beliefs about themselves were so broken and needed a lot of care. So I sort of bounce between the two, whether they're adults or whether they're young kids, and just see how that unfolds. And I think the best thing that I always come back to, and why this is sort of the core of my work, is because at the bottom of it, unless you're able to look internally and esteem yourself from within, it doesn't matter if you're taking medication for this drug, or you're trying to, be abstinent for this amount of time. If you can't figure out what your needs are and what your boundaries are, and how to reshape your reality around the core message that you believe in yourself, then you're just Band-Aid solutioning everything. And, it's only a matter of time. It's only until the next relationship you get in, until the next curveball that comes and whacks you in the face, that you go, oh, and start unraveling all that I'm not good enough message again, or whatever your message might be. So that's the work, and everyone that I see, I now go, where are you at? Like, let's talk about you, whether it's talking about their relationship, talking about their relationship to their addiction or to their mental health concern. I say, what role do you play in that?
I love that. And I just want to go back to what you said when you saw that one therapist and you're like, I want to pay you to help me help someone else. And you left, what was it like for you to come to terms with, your own, lack of self-esteem? How long did it take you to kind of light that flame from within, to realize, wait a minute, this is what's going on with me, and I've got to work on this?
Look, I would be lying if I said that, my shame doesn't live and decide to pop up whenever he wants to. That's my wounded child. That's going to be with me forever. So I guess now it's more about learning that I will never get rid of that shame message, but I will learn very much how to manage it, and how to challenge it, and how to dispute it, that it's not real. I think the part that made me start to realize that it needs to be looked at and it needs to come to the surface is that the more that I guess had this life of helping and saving others, the more that my internal world was in turmoil and chaos. And slowly, the more that happens, it just becomes toxic. So I was getting really unwell. My depression, my anxiety, my panic attacks, suicidal, all these big moments in my life where it kept coming up. And I said, it's just my shame keep coming out of my body, wanting to go, just address that you're not good enough, and either accept it and die, or work with it and start to go, that's distorted. Where did that come from? Who taught you that? Where I wasn't born with that. I was born with inherent worth. Somewhere along the line, I learned something different and started telling myself something different. So that's something that, my triggers, whatever they are, a lot of it is based on relationship. I think that most issues come down to an intimacy-based issue, that it's the way that my attachment works. So I really do sit with myself and say, you are, those affirmations of challenging that message that you are good enough and you do matter, you are lovable, those things are really important. Now, we can fake it till we make it, and say those in front of a mirror, and then walk out and do things that that go against that and reaffirm that you aren't good enough, or we can back it up with actions and set some boundaries and figure out what it is that I need. And that's an ongoing thing. And I will have counseling for as long as I can afford it for the rest of my life, I believe.
Yeah, it's very powerful, man. You're a pretty incredible dude. Sincerely, I'm kind of inspired by your really your wisdom. I know people are listening to this going, "Oh my God, I wanna find out about that guy." Seriously, I really mean that. And I want to keep coming back to this because I really do think it's really powerful. Was there and again, it's hard to generalize, but was there a bottom point for you where, look, I need to get going and address this? I mean, you mentioned suicide for the first time, or suicidal ideation for the first time. What was the process for you when you were like, okay, this has to be dealt with?
I think essentially it was when I was alone. I guess without realizing it, I was someone that sort of has had a pretty someone by my side the whole time, and whether that they were functional or dysfunctional, I was dependent on that and lived that. So when I was alone, I noticed how much I was seeking that connection, seeking that from others, and that was my bottom. It wasn't necessarily a suicidal place or a really, really depressed place. It was just and I just started to notice how much I was trying to find connection with others, and whether that was with drugs, whether that was with relationship, it didn't matter. I was just noticing that you can't sit by yourself. So that was my bottom. Was, if you don't figure this out, you need to. And I did, classic addiction based shit with, codependency traits. I'd go and start doing yoga every single day, thinking that was going to be my cure, but that became my addiction. So I learned very quickly that it's about moderation. I could do really, really healthy things in not a moderate way, which becomes out of control or controlling. So now that sort of became my path, is just settle, just learn how to be by yourself. And now when I do yoga, it's not excessive. Or now when I look after myself, it's not to the extreme. It's just the right amount that I need for myself. So learning how to be by myself and actually taking the time to do that. And for anyone that's sort of never not been by themselves, is you're threatening what that might look like in your future, in your future relationships and your future with yourself.
When you're working with people, Jackson, what is it about you do you feel that enables you to get in there and maybe help your clients see their own light from within?
Yeah, that's a good question, Guy. I think, look, there's a lot of cliche terms that we use in counseling, like, oh, I can understand where you're coming from, which I don't think is true. No one can understand where anyone's coming from in the context of what they've been through, even if it's the same trauma of, let's say physical abuse. You got punched differently, you perceived it differently. What I believe is the same is the emotional pain that comes with it. And I'm young, so I see a lot of people that are much older than me, and that is an immediate boundary or barrier to some of their vulnerability and ability to connect with me. And I say, have you experienced emotional pain by your shame or by your some of this stuff and that's happened to you? And they say, yeah. Well, I say, well, I have too. And I guess when I can draw into, I have shame and I live with that, and I have had emotional pain, and I've overcome that, and I will have more emotional pain again. If I can connect on an emotional level with somebody and base purely my counseling off relationship before any modality comes into play, that's how I get people to open up to me. And that's also why people don't want to see me. Like, you don't have a modality. I say, my modality is to know you. My modality is to sit with you and figure out how I'm going to connect with you and sit with you in this space.
Let me just reintroduce you. So I'm speaking with Jackson Goading. He's at Find Reason Therapy. What's the URL for that, Jackson?
It's findreasontherapy.com.au, and I'll send you through a little link to the codependency blog that sort of is on my page that might make a little bit more sense in a bit more depth.
Okay. So let's talk about your podcast. When did you start that? Why did you start that? And what do you do on your podcast?
So the podcast, Reason With Me, look, completely and utterly inspired by one and only guy.
Truly? Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. I believe that your podcast is definitely the main reason that I started mine, and the trauma that's needed to be talked about is so hit in so many angles with your podcast. And look, COVID was and is a very intense thing in the world, but I guess a lot of people have taken advantage of that. And I had time. I was working from home and I was doing my thing and realized, hey, I can do it. I can do it too. And I think I just started doing things. And I like being on the camera. I like talking, and I write a lot. So I thought, why not write and talk? And eventually that stuff, talking for myself and just expressing myself and talking about the areas I work in, then became, hey, I can get some pretty cool guests on. And man, I think you told me it's like, if you just ask someone, most of them actually say yes. So yeah, quite a few people have been on, and I've gotten a lot of opportunities like this to go speak on others as well. So yeah, I think I started it, in probably maybe early COVID, for like March, April last year, 2020. And yeah, it's on and off now. I'm back full time in the office now, so I don't have as much time. I normally have my Fridays to do a bit of filming, and this season is all women. So got a few more women this season to go, just to talk about their experiences. And the podcast is about building connection, talking about mental health and your overall well-being. And I guess I get people to reason with me to talk about what it is about their journey and what it is about their experiences that are innovative and unique, that bring something to educate us about where we're going and what we can do in the future.
That's awesome. That's awesome. In terms of, the work you do, and I know, you don't have a zillion years of experience, but in terms of codependency, and I know a lot of people probably listening to this are going to want to learn more about it. But before we get to a book recommendation or so forth, can you share with us kind of an early clinical error of your own and what you learned from that?
I could share a few, but I'll pick, I guess. I was just listening to another podcast of yours recently, and they said one that I think rings true for me too, is that treating trauma is so intense. And I think a lot of people, especially in Australia, we're a bit behind in the times in terms of the rest of the world for understanding the difference between trauma-informed practice, which is just to be aware, and trauma-focused practice, which is to treat it. And we either don't treat it and we just go, oh, that's too big, and we park it, or we do. And I think early on, I was so much more of that, no, we treat it, that I probably stepped into that space a bit too quick for people, and really didn't, for some of them, didn't realize that they weren't as ready or willing or able because they weren't safe and stable, which, I guess that's the biggest clinical error for me is not focusing on, the most important part of trauma work, which is to build safety and stability. I wanted to process some of that stuff, and that's probably my biggest clinical error is really going, I didn't realize that they weren't safe and stable. I need to focus much more time on that. And I believe that the safety and stability of trauma work is the majority of the work. You might not even get to process. You might not even get to treating it in the core that might be needed, that you can see as the therapist is what they need to do. But if they aren't safe and stable to do so, which may take a long, long time, that we can't go there, and we need to really hold a space where they can trust us and they can feel safe with us, and that's there's a bit of time up in that. So that's probably my number one clinical error. The other error, if I can just quickly guide, like I said, I was working in this addiction treatment center for trauma-based issues. That was a vortex, like I said, and all my stuff was just out on show, and I didn't realize at the time, but when I was doing a little bit of while I was studying, I was doing a little bit of my placement there, and all my stuff was out on the table. I felt so uncomfortable about it that I actually like retreated quite a bit, and I'd, be on my phone, or I'd sort of not engage on purpose to people because I felt uncomfortable, and I wasn't able to connect with people as much because I didn't realize, but my stuff was all over the place, and I was sort of, you know, healing and dealing with me whilst trying to help and treat others. And luckily, I wasn't the primary therapist that came in and did these amazing groups. I was doing enough and doing more than I should have been towards, knowing that my shit was all over the place. So I think that the clinical area was, you got to do the work on you. And a lot of therapists haven't. And I think learning about that self-awareness and learning, like, when you're in a space that does bring it all out, it's like there's heaps here, and that counter transference is undeniable. And especially when working with young kids, they'll see straight through that, and they'll understand it. So I guess, I was doing the work, but in hindsight, my clinical area is yeah, there's probably a little bit more that I needed to do, and be humble in the fact that that's okay. And that's you're human, and you've had these experiences just like everybody else. So learning from that has been massive.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you feel at all, or how do you feel as a guy, as a male, talking about your own stuff, your own shit? Is that at all challenging for you, difficult for you? It was for me. And I know, just let me share this briefly, the more, as I've done the podcast or doing the podcast and talking to really incredible guests, even like yourself, it's allowed me to open up more.
Yeah.
What's your experience been?
I'm a talker. So, I really do like talking, but like I said, I'm better at talking about you,
Right.
so that just comes much more naturally to me. Even when I do need to say something to someone, and that's where it builds up into my resentments and my, pains and itches, because I don't then say, well, how I'm impacted. And I guess, again, learning that was no longer an option for me, and that served me up until now. And when it did serve me to go, no, you got to learn. And yeah, it's a tough space to be in. Like I said, I pretty much left the counselor that was trying to tell me that you need to do work on yourself. I was like, no, not yet. But yeah, I guess, I run a lot of groups, and I've seen group facilitators do it really poorly, and I've seen group facilitators do it amazingly. And I think the ones that do it amazingly are authentic and real. And yes, as much as that is challenging, I'm a role model in that space to be able to connect. And when people have emotions, I'm right there with you to tell you that that's emotional, and that thing just came up for you, and that's making me emotional. And it was uncomfortable at first, but now, I'll catch people out in the lift. I'm like, oh, this looks like you're going through something. And, so I challenge myself to be more authentic. And I think vulnerability and authenticness sort of match and are the same thing. So that's come, it's been a journey, and I'm sure it will be continue to be so. But yeah, I definitely think that I challenge a lot of the male stereotypes in this space. Yeah, that's for sure.
Awesome. All right. As we wind down here, how about a go-to book recommendation, whether trauma related or not, or codependency related or not? What do you have?
Look, I think the game changer for me was Facing Codependency by Pia Melody. That was great. It actually comes with I've got it here. It comes with a workbook. Comes with a workbook to actually, follow like you're back in school working on your shit. So it's a full recovery workbook to codependency, and it's taken me a couple of years because it's an intense bit of work and of self work. So yeah, that'd probably be my number one. And if you want the workbook, and because you really want to do more work on yourself than you need to, then yeah, do that too. But yeah, that, and then anything by Gabor Mate, I think The Realm of Hungry Ghosts. Anytime he talks about addiction, he says, insert, your addiction here. And I think in terms of codependency, or relationships in general, there isn't a harder addiction than relationships.
Mm.
They are complicated. They are
Mm.
everywhere you go. And, we can give up drugs and alcohol, and we can avoid, our dealers and bottle shops, but we can't avoid connection. We can't avoid intimacy. Or if we do, we really struggle a lot quicker than we do when we're coming down from any drug or alcohol. So yeah, that's sort of my recommendations is those two people are really massive in my motivation to keep doing this work.
So that's Pew Melody and Gabor Mate. Of course, we'll have those linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. All right, Jackson, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So obviously the Reason With Me podcast, which is on all your podcasting places, and reasonwithme.com.au is my website, and just Reason With Me, or not just, but yeah, Reason With Me is my Instagram handle as well, which I post regularly on. And yeah, any of those there's ways to connect with me, and plenty of writings and quirky videos on there talking more shit about my stuff and how to help other people's stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, brother, man. This was great. I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, truly, man, you are one inspirational dude, and I want to thank you for coming on here today. I know it's early over there.
Yeah, well, it's a real honor, guy, and I would love to come back anytime, that. So no, I really do appreciate it, and all the best, man.
All right, man. Take care.
Cheers.